The air in the temple was thick with the smell of sacrilege, a sickening mix of foreign incense and something far worse. High priest Menelaus stood before the defiled altar, a sneer twisting his lips as he surveyed the scene. His eyes, cold and calculating, swept over the terrified faces of the few remaining priests and worshippers. He wasn't just there to mock, he was there to destroy. With a theatrical flourish, Menelaus declared the ultimate insult, ordering his men to heave a grotesque pagan idol onto the very spot where the Holy of Holies once stood. The metallic clang of the idol hitting the sacred stone echoed through the hallowed space, a sound that tore at the souls of all who heard it. Menelaus's voice, amplified by the stunned silence, boomed across the courtyard. He wasn't just desecrating the temple, he was ripping apart the very fabric of their existence. He announced a decree, his words dripping with contempt, abolishing Jewish law, forbidding their ancient customs, and demanding absolute adherence to Hellenistic worship. Every Sabbath, every dietary law, every prayer, all were to be replaced by the rituals of their Greek overlords. It was an act of pure, unadulterated tyranny, designed to erase their identity. I, Eleazar, a humble scribe, stood hidden in a darkened corner, my heart a leaden weight in my chest. Despair was a palpable thing around me, a thick fog that choked the air. I saw the tears in the eyes of the women, the slumped shoulders of the men, the silent resignation that threatened to consume us all. But even as that despair tried to claim me, something else stirred within. A quiet, burning resolve, a stubborn refusal to let this be the end. My gaze, though, was drawn away from the horror unfolding before me. In a small, forgotten nook, tucked away from the main chaos, an ancient oil lamp, one that had been extinguished for days, flickered. A tiny, defiant flame, almost imperceptible, danced to life. Menelaus, too consumed by his grand, evil spectacle, didn't notice it. None of his soldiers did, but I saw it. That small, persistent glow, a tiny beacon in the overwhelming darkness. It was an act of defiance, a quiet miracle in the face of such profound desecration, and it whispered of a greater uprising yet to come. Even in darkness, a flicker of light can ignite a revolution. My fingers tightened around the hidden scroll I clutched beneath my tunic. It contained the words of our ancestors, the laws Menelaus sought to erase. My eyes remained fixed on that flickering flame, a silent vow forming on my lips. The fight, I knew, had just begun. This was not the end. It was merely the beginning of something far greater, something that would demand sacrifice and courage. That small, resilient flame was a promise. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us where you are watching from in the comments. To truly understand the weight of that moment, of Menelaus' monstrous decree, we need to step back. Imagine ancient Judea, a land of rolling hills carpeted with olive groves, where the sun beat down on ancient stone and the air carried the scent of dust and distant incense. Life here wasn't about grand empires or political games. It revolved around the magnificent temple in Jerusalem, the heart of our world, and the steady, comforting rhythm of Jewish law. In small villages like Modi'in, nestled among those hills, life was simple but rich. Families were everything. You'd wake with the sun, the sounds of goats and children filling the air. There were vibrant community gatherings, joyous Sabbath meals where stories were shared and blessings offered. The study of Torah wasn't just for scholars. It was woven into the fabric of daily life, a constant guide. We learned from our elders, taught our children, and found peace in the ancient wisdom. This was the world Menelaus sought to shatter. I, Eleazar, was a scholarly man, yes, but my dreams were simple, focused on a peaceful life. I yearned to dedicate myself to learning, to teaching, to preserving the spiritual heritage of my people. The sanctity of the temple wasn't just a concept to me, it was a living, breathing truth, the bridge between heaven and earth. The idea of it being defiled, of our traditions being erased, was a nightmare I never thought possible. But Menelaus had been a shadow lurking on the edges of our peace for some time. At first, he seemed charismatic, a man of influence. He had a way with words, a charm that masked his true intentions. He was opportunistic, always looking for an angle, and he found it in the Seleucid Greeks. He started small, making political alliances, whispering in the ears of those in power. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, his influence grew. He chipped away at our autonomy, not with a hammer, but with 1,000 tiny cuts. He'd promise protection, then demand concessions. He'd offer trade, then impose foreign laws. Each step seemed minor, a necessary evil for peace. But each step eroded a piece of who we were. The growing unease was like a low hum beneath the surface of our lives. It wasn't always spoken aloud, but you could feel it. A quiet fear started to spread as Hellenistic culture, with its foreign gods and practices, began to infiltrate our traditions. It wasn't just the grand pronouncements, it was the subtle things. The Greek statues appearing in public squares, the Roman games being introduced, the pressure to adopt their customs for trade or social standing. It felt like a slow poison, seeping into the very roots of our identity. People started to question, to whisper, could we hold on to our way of life? Would our children still know the ancient prayers? This wasn't just about politics or power. It was about our very souls, about whether we would remain a people or simply fade into the vast, indifferent Hellenistic world. The desecration of the temple, that horrific moment I witnessed, wasn't a sudden storm. It was the culmination of years of this slow, relentless erosion, a final, brutal declaration of war on our heritage. The memory of Menelaus's broken promises still stung. He had started out assuring everyone he would protect our traditions, that his alliances with the Greeks were purely for the good of Judea. He swore he would uphold the sacred laws, but those words turned to ash. Each concession he made, each new Greek custom he allowed, chipped away at our trust. It wasn't just big public betrayals, it was the everyday slights, the veiled humiliations that really started to wear us down. I remember one market day in Jerusalem. A Hellenized official, a man who had once been a respected elder in our community, openly mocked a group of women for wearing their traditional head coverings. He called them old-fashioned, backward, a hindrance to progress. His Greek companions laughed. The women, their faces flushed with shame, hurried away. It was a small thing, but it cut deep. It showed us that our ways were not just being tolerated, they were being ridiculed, made to feel inferior. Then there was the time a group of young men, fresh from Hellenistic schools, publicly ate pork in the town square, right before the Sabbath. They did it with a smirk, watching for reactions. It was a deliberate act of disrespect, a challenge to everything we held sacred, and the Greek soldiers standing nearby did nothing but watch, amused. These weren't direct attacks, but they were constant jabs, slowly eroding our sense of dignity and power. Menelaus was a master at playing people against each other. He'd find ambitious local leaders, whisper promises of power and wealth in their ears, and turn them against their own communities. He knew the fault lines in our society, the old rivalries, the family disputes, and he exploited them all. He'd offer Hellenistic education to the children of one family, giving them an advantage while subtly penalizing another for adhering too strictly to Jewish law. He created divisions where there had been unity, sowing distrust among neighbors, making it harder for us to stand together. He'd promise a new road to one village if they agreed to host a pagan festival, knowing full well the festival would offend the next village over. It was a cunning, slow-motion dismantling of our social fabric, all for his own gain. The injustices started small, then grew. I heard stories, too many stories. A family in a neighboring village had their olive groves confiscated because they refused to participate in a public sacrifice to Zeus. Their plea to the local Hellenized magistrate was met with a cold stare and a dismissive wave of the hand. Another family, known for their strict adherence to kosher laws, found their storefront vandalized, their goods scattered in the street, with no one to claim responsibility or offer recourse. These weren't isolated incidents. They were part of a pattern, a systematic campaign to either force us to conform or to break us. Our rights, once protected by ancient covenants and tradition, were being stripped away piece by piece. We became second-class citizens in our own land, our heritage a burden, our faith a crime. The desecration of the temple, the moment I saw that idol standing where our most sacred ark should have been, wasn't a sudden, out-of-the-blue act of madness. It was the crushing culmination of all those years of calculated oppression, of broken promises, of veiled humiliations, of cunning manipulation, and of countless injustices. It was the final, brutal declaration of Menelaus's true intent, not just to control us, but to erase us. It was a systematic attempt to wipe out our heritage, our identity, and our very existence as a distinct people. That moment was not a beginning, but an end, the end of any illusion that peace could be found through submission. It was the point of no return. The air across Judea grew thick with a suffocating tension. It felt like a heavy blanket had been thrown over everything, pressing down on our lives. Greek garrisons, once distant threats, now dotted the landscape, their soldiers a constant, unsettling presence. In every town, in every village square, new pagan altars rose, crude stone slabs mocking our traditions. The smell of burning animal fat, offered to foreign gods, became a common, sickening scent carried on the breeze. It was no longer just about subtle pressure. It was an open declaration of war on our way of life. Open clashes started to break out, small at first, then growing more frequent and violent. It wasn't just us against the Greeks anymore, it was Jew against Jew. Those who had embraced Hellenistic ways, seeing it as a path to power or simply a way to survive, found themselves in direct conflict with those who clung fiercely to their traditions. I remember arguments in the synagogue, once places of quiet study, turning into shouting matches. People debated whether to resist openly, risking everything, or to submit, hoping to preserve some fragment of their faith in secret. The lines were drawn, and the community, once so unified, began to splinter. Neighbors who had shared meals and celebrated holidays for generations now looked at each other with suspicion. Families were torn apart. A father might choose to conform to protect his children, while his brother refused, leading to bitter feuds that ran deeper than any political disagreement. The pressure to conform to Hellenistic ways became immense. There were public festivals where attendance was mandatory, sacrifices to idols that became tests of loyalty. Refusal meant severe penalties, fines, imprisonment, even execution. I saw good people break under this pressure, their eyes filled with shame and regret. But what choice did they have when their children's lives were at stake? Trust, that precious glue that held our society together, began to erode completely. Menelaus, meanwhile, grew bolder, his cruelty unchecked. He was no longer just a cunning manipulator, he had become a tyrant. Bolstered by the full support of Antiochus IV Epiphanes, the Seleucid king, his decrees became harsher, his punishments more brutal. He didn't just want us to worship Greek gods, he wanted us to forget our own. He outlawed circumcision, a fundamental covenant, and made the observance of the Sabbath a capital offense. Copies of the Torah were publicly burned, and those caught studying them were put to death. He actively persecuted anyone who dared to hold on to their faith, turning our sacred practices into acts of defiance punishable by death. His ambition had twisted into something truly monstrous, fueled by a desire to utterly eradicate our identity. I witnessed the despair firsthand. It was a suffocating weight that settled over everyone. I saw forced sacrifices, families torn apart by impossible choices, the systematic destruction of everything we held dear. Each new decree, each act of persecution, chipped away at our spirit. I felt the heavy burden of collective suffering, the silent cries of my people. The threat of cultural annihilation was no longer a distant fear. It was a looming shadow, growing darker with each passing day. It felt like we were drowning, slowly but surely, in a sea of foreign customs and brutal oppression. The flicker of hope I'd seen in the temple, that tiny lamp, felt like a distant memory, almost extinguished by the overwhelming darkness that had descended upon Judea. We were at a breaking point, a people on the verge of losing everything. The despair was a thick blanket, threatening to smother any remaining spark. Then, something happened that no one expected. In the quiet town of Modian, a Greek officer, arrogant and dismissive, demanded that Mattathias, an old and respected priest, step forward and offer a sacrifice to an idol. It was a test, a public humiliation designed to break the spirit of the community. Everyone watched, holding their breath. No one moved. The air was heavy with fear and unspoken defiance. Suddenly, a Hellenized Jew, eager to please the Greeks, or perhaps just to avoid trouble, pushed his way through the crowd. He approached the altar, ready to comply with the officer's demand. It was a sight that made my stomach churn, a betrayal of everything we stood for. But before he could even touch the idol, Mattathias, who had been standing there, his face etched with pain and fury, exploded into action. It was a sudden, almost unbelievable surge of righteous anger. He didn't hesitate. With a swift, powerful movement, he struck down the Hellenized Jew right there at the altar. The crowd gasped. Before anyone could react, Mattathias turned his wrath on the Greek officer himself, killing him too. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the gasps and murmurs of the stunned onlookers. This act, so sudden and violent, was more than just an impulsive outburst. It was like a lightning bolt hitting dry tinder. It ignited a spark of rebellion that had been smoldering beneath the surface of Jewish society for too long. People had been suffering in silence, their anger hidden, their defiance whispered. Mattathias's act ripped away that silence, exposing the raw wound of their oppression. I was there, watching it all unfold, my heart pounding in my chest. For weeks, for months, I had felt the despair, the suffocation, the slow erosion of our identity. I had clung to the idea of quiet resistance, of preserving our faith in secret. But seeing Mattathias, an old man, stand up with such ferocity, risking everything, something shifted inside me. I realized then that passive resistance was no longer an option. The time for whispering and hiding was over. The time for action had come. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, but also filled me with a strange sense of purpose, that I had to join him. I had to join Mattathias and his sons, the Maccabees. It meant embracing a path of active revolt, a path filled with danger and bloodshed, but it felt like the only path left. The response from the Seleucid forces was immediate and brutal, just as we expected. They poured into Modi'in, seeking retribution for the killed officer. Their goal was to crush this budding rebellion before it could take root. They rounded up people, tortured them for information, and executed anyone suspected of sympathizing with Mattathias. This brutal display of power, however, only solidified the resolve of those who had witnessed Mattathias's courage. It showed everyone the true face of their oppressors. It was no longer about religious differences or cultural assimilation. It was about survival. Mattathias's defiant act laid bare the true nature of the oppression. It stripped away all the polite pretenses, all the subtle manipulations, and revealed the raw, brutal choice facing the Jewish people. Complete assimilation, losing everything that made them who they were, or active resistance, fighting for their very existence. This moment in Modi'in shattered the cycle of quiet suffering. It was a line in the sand, a turning point that would forever change the course of our history. The flicker of hope I'd seen in the temple, that tiny lamp, was no longer a distant memory. It had been rekindled, burning brighter now, fueled by the courage of one old priest. The fight had truly begun. The immediate aftermath of Mattathias's act forced us into a new reality. There was no going back. We had to flee Modi'in, leaving behind our homes and everything familiar. The Maccabees, Mattathias, and his sons led us into the hills. We became guerrillas, living off the land, constantly moving, constantly hiding. For me, Eliezer, the transition was jarring. One day I was a scribe, poring over ancient texts, dreaming of quiet scholarship. The next, I was a warrior scribe, my hands calloused from holding a sword instead of a quill, my mind racing with battle strategies instead of Torah interpretations. Fear was a constant companion. Every rustle in the bushes, every distant sound, sent a jolt through me. I doubted myself endlessly. Could I truly fight? Could I survive this brutal existence? But then I would look at Mattathias, his eyes burning with an unshakable conviction, or at Judah, his son, radiating strength and determination, and I would find a new resolve. We were fighting for our very soul, for the right to be who we were. Not everyone joined us. Some villagers, inspired by Mattathias, left everything to follow us into the wilderness, becoming fierce allies. They brought their strength, their knowledge of the land, and their unwavering faith. They became our eyes and ears, risking their lives to bring us information and supplies. But others, paralyzed by fear of Seleucid reprisal, turned away. They saw us as reckless, doomed to fail. A few sadly even betrayed us, hoping to curry favor with the oppressors. It was a harsh lesson in human nature, seeing how fear could twist loyalty and turn neighbor against neighbor. Life in the Judean wilderness was incredibly harsh. The days were hot, the nights cold. Food was scarce, and water even scarcer. We learned to move silently, to strike swiftly, and to disappear without a trace. We were always outnumbered, always outgunned, but we had the advantage of knowing the terrain and the burning fire of our cause. Skirmishes were constant. We would ambush Seleucid patrols, disrupting their supply lines, striking fear into their hearts. Each victory, no matter how small, boosted our morale. Each loss, each fallen comrade, weighed heavily on our spirits. We held makeshift funerals, burying our dead in the rocky soil, their names whispered into the wind as a promise of vengeance. Maintaining morale and faith amidst such overwhelming odds was a daily struggle. Mattathias and Judah understood this. They would gather us around campfires, sharing stories of our ancestors, reminding us of God's covenant with Israel. They spoke of the temple, of the sacred traditions we were fighting to protect, of the future generations who would thank us for our sacrifice. These moments, simple yet profound, rekindled our hope and reaffirmed our purpose. The psychological impact of the war was immense. I, who had once recoiled at the thought of violence, now wielded a sword. I had seen men die, both enemies and friends. I grappled with the moral complexities of taking a life, even in defense of our faith. There were moments of profound despair, when the odds seemed insurmountable, when the losses felt too great. But then I would witness acts of incredible bravery. A young man, barely more than a boy, charging fearlessly into battle. An old woman risking everything to bring us food. These acts of courage, big and small, showed me the true strength of our people. This war, for all its horror, was shaping me, shaping all of us. It was forging us into something new, something stronger, deepening our understanding of faith, nationhood, and the price of freedom. It was a crucible, burning away our old lives and molding us into warriors for a sacred cause. After years of arduous fighting, of living on the edge, the impossible happened. We, the Maccabees, a small band of rebels, against all odds, reclaimed Jerusalem. The city, once a symbol of our despair, now echoed with the sounds of our triumph. The first thing we did, even before celebrating, was to cleanse the temple. It was a painstaking, heartbreaking task. Every idol had to be smashed, every pagan symbol removed. We scrubbed the stones, purified the altars, and rebuilt what had been desecrated. I, Eleazar, now a respected elder among the fighters, stood there, my hands calloused from battle, my heart full of a quiet, profound joy, participating in every step of the rededication. The memory of Menelaus, the high priest who had betrayed us, still lingered like a foul odor. His reign of treachery, his greed, and his ambition had led to so much suffering. But justice, in its own slow way, found him. He was eventually executed, not by our hands, but by Antiochus IV himself. The king, frustrated by his failed policies in Judea and seeing Menelaus as a convenient scapegoat for the ongoing rebellion, had him put to death. It was a fitting, if somewhat ironic, end for a man who had sold his soul for power. His demise was a quiet message to all who sought to destroy our faith. Betrayal would not go unpunished. The moment of rededication was etched into my memory forever. The temple, once a symbol of our oppression, now gleamed under the Judean sun, purified and ready for worship. But there was a problem. We searched for pure oil, consecrated for the temple lamp, and found only one small cruse, enough for a single day. Despair flickered, but then a miracle. That tiny cruse of oil burned, not for one day, but for 8. 8 days, while new, pure oil was prepared. It was a sign, a powerful affirmation from above, that our struggle had been righteous, that our faith was strong, and that God was with us. This event, the burning of the oil, became the foundation for our holiday of Hanukkah, a yearly reminder of light and darkness, of hope against overwhelming odds. I often reflect on the journey from the despair of Menelaus' initial desecration to this triumph. I remember the quiet terror in the villages, the forced sacrifices, the fear of cultural annihilation. I recall the moment Mattathias struck down the Hellenized Jew, igniting the spark of rebellion, and my own decision to join the Maccabees, embracing the path of active revolt. The years in the wilderness, the constant danger, the skirmishes, the losses, the profound psychological toll, it all played a part. I witnessed acts of incredible bravery, moments of deep despair, and the unwavering conviction that kept us going. The sacrifices were immense. Many brave men and women gave their lives. But their legacy lives on, a testament to the enduring power of faith and resistance in the face of tyranny. We fought not just for land, but for our very identity. For the right to practice our traditions, to teach our children the ways of our ancestors. The story of Hanukkah, of the miracle of the oil, is more than just a historical event. It is a timeless message. Even in the darkest times, when all hope seems lost, a flicker of light can ignite a revolution. It teaches us that resilience, courage, and an unwavering belief in what is right can overcome even the most formidable challenges. It fostered a lasting legacy of freedom and identity for generations to come, a light that continues to burn brightly, reminding us that hope and light can always prevail.